everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. Right now, we are in a absolutely wild time. You've kind of heard me talking about the President Trump tariffs. How I think, the word reciprocal actually is pretty easy to understand, but some people around the world don't understand the word reciprocal. If you charge me a tariff, I'll charge you a tariff. That sounds reciprocal to me, and I think we're going to end up at the other end of this a lot better off than we are now. But today's topic is about my beloved state, California, and I have an absolutely wonderful friend of the show, Ronald Stein, and he and I have been on several podcasts together. He is an author, and I trust his opinion on just about anything related with energy. And welcome to the podcast, Ronald. How are you today?
We're glad to be aboard.
I'll tell you, we're just yucking it up here before the show. And the reason we're talking today is because of the California Energy Commission and the U.S. Energy Information. We're talking California's closing or losing more refineries. What does this mean?
It means that Governor Newsom is totally ignorant to the supply-demand equation. He wants to basically get us away from fossil fuels, but he's only focusing on the supply. Oil production's in terminal decline in California, and refining is on terminal decline in California, but he's doing nothing about the demand. The demand's still there, and we're still building hospitals and expanding airports. Like I said, demand is totally not relevant to Governor Newsom. And
I found this kind of funny. I was checking on some things, and it seems like the downstream capacity has grown in China since President Xi met with Governor Newsom. Now, cause and effect, correlation, are they related? Don't know. But I'm kind of nervous if you think you have made this statement several times, and I applaud you for this statement. California, I can't claim this as my Ronald, as much as I would like to. It's a brilliant statement. California is now an energy security problem for the United States.
That's correct. It's interesting because China is silently supporting what Newsom is doing, getting rid of the supply side. And in Asia, they're planning on building, I think, almost over 80 refineries. In fact, in the next few years, 8 of them are coming on board. And so they'll be able to meet the demand because they're not getting rid of the demand. The airports are expanding. And
the Valero, Valencia, Solano County is 140,000 barrels per day scheduled to close by a whole list. This will be in the show notes when we put this out there. Kern Oil Refining, Bakersy. I mean, there's just a huge number of refineries. How much oil the California imports 60% of the oil that they actually produce in their downstream is imported.
That's correct. Yeah, when the oil embargo hit 50 years ago, California was pretty much oil independent. Between production in California and production in Alaska, we only imported about 5% of the demands of the state. But with the
efforts, again,
we imported 5% of our demands from foreign countries 50 years ago.
Since 1977.
Yes. And since that time, we've been on a campaign to reduce oil production. And the good news is they've been successful reducing oil production. The bad news is that demands are still there, and we are now importing more than 60% of our crude oil from foreign countries. We're a national security risk.
And some of them are not very friendly.
We're a national security risk on that end. And now that we're losing refining capacity, i.e. the supply side, to meet the demands, because refiners are producing different fuels, gasoline, diesel, aviation, and the oil derivatives that help make all the products in our daily lives. Now that that's going away, China's chomping at the bit. With the new refiners coming on board, they'll be shipping the finished products to us to meet the demands of our society.
Wow. I can see a lot of graft and corruption forming here. And if we ought to get dope, because you could almost follow the money. Here's President Xi meeting with Governor Newsom. I don't have any proof on this, but if there's cause and effect, they meet, they continue to decline on this, and then all of a sudden there's all these refineries closing. We're going to see even higher Right.
Exactly.
The,
Well, another
the
interesting aspect
pump
is
in
our marine facilities aren't really geared to bring in finished products like that. And there are increased congestion and there's vessel limitations. And the other thing is California has a unique blend that California refineries have to adhere to. I am not sure China's going to be motivated to make a special blend just for California.
That is something I had, Ronald. That's why you're paid the big bucks to be here today, because I hadn't even thought of. I mean, it's there in plain sight because they have the California blend. Holy smokes! Why would you want to do that just for one customer unless you charge a premium?
Well, you know, they've
Even
got
more
it, and
money.
they've got it, and we need it.
They'll do it.
Yeah, all of the money.
Oh my goodness. Now, Ronald, you had an interesting thought process on tariffs as well too, and we were
Well,
before the show.
yeah, the tariffs is, I'll repeat it. You know, right now we're importing widgets that are made in foreign countries because they got low wages, you know, because 80% of the world is living on less than $10 a day. So they're not compensated. They've got no labor laws, no environmental laws. So we can import those widgets into the United States. Now, can we make it here? Yeah, darn right we can make it here, but we have minimum wage requirements. We've got OSHA. We got environmental laws. So we'll make the widget here, but it's going to be much more expensive than importing it from a place that has everything else we don't have.
When we sit back and take a look, I think when we get through with this tariff war going on, I think that it is going to be better for the United States. But we're not going to be able to just bring in all these jobs, all this manufacturing within 15 minutes. I mean,
No,
it's not going to
no.
happen.
To get it designed, approved, you know, all of the permitting, it'll take 10 to 20 years to get ramped up totally.
What are some of the steps that you think, besides moving out of California, did I say that? That I mean, Californians can do because this is a critical issue.
You know, my passion is to stimulate conversations about energy literacy. And that's the one thing that Newsom will not participate in because he wants to, you know, phase away from fossil fuels. I'm all for that because they're not going to last forever. And, you know, right now the world's consuming almost 100 million barrels a day, extracting that out of Mother Earth. That's going to last so long. And
Right.
we want to, you know, focus on conservation efficiencies, and make those oils last as long as they can because the demands are going up. You know, the wealthy countries are demanding all these products and aviation fuels and diesel fuels and gasoline. And, you know, the 80% of the world that's living on less than $10 a day would like to join the Industrial Revolution and get those products. Right. So it's going to be a real challenge for society. And unless we can get conversations going, because, like I say, they're only focused, all this over regulations, over taxing, it's all on the supply side.
Wow. You know, it's almost like the regulations in the Palisades fire area. They still don't have anybody getting permits to rebuild. Permitting in California is terrible.
Possible? Is that another word?
Impossible. Did I hear impossible? I think my internet connection must be bad today. I heard impossible.
It's a challenge. It's a real challenge.
Oh my goodness. At what point, though, when you talk about Ronald, you are spot on making an energy literacy a discussion with everyone. But you also have a huge point, and that is the regulatory issues. At what point, as California is what the fifth largest
yes,
in the world,
right?
Texas is down there low around the 7 or 8, or we're just chicken feed next to California.
Right. But now let me give you another horror story too.
Okay.
Because California refineries, Arizona and Nevada are dependent on California because 45% of Arizona's transportation fuels comes from California. Ooh, 88% of Nevada's transportation fuels comes from California. And if we lose in refinery capacity, those transportation fuels are be coming from China. So not only California, but Arizona and Nevada.
This is a huge security issue. I mean, this is not just a minor. This is like, holy smokes, Batman. We better get the Bat phone and connect it up with Secretary Chris Wright immediately.
I send my articles to him as well.
I love Chris Wright, by the way. He is absolutely a cool cat. And I can't believe I just called the Secretary of State a cool cat, but he is. So I mean, he's one of the good guys out there, and it's nice to have a Secretary of Energy. Have you seen his traveling around the world? He's meeting with Dubai and United Arab Emirates, and he's meeting in Saudi Arabia and everything, and he's meeting with other Qatar and other serious world producers around the world. That's what I voted for. Was that kind of hey, let's have discussions about energy.
Well, like I say, all those places he's visiting is a potential supply to California. We've got ample oil available here, but getting a permit ain't going to happen.
I reached out to when at the time we were recording this to Mike Umbro, and he was sitting in the dentist chair. So when we'll have him on the next conversation with me and you and him to talk
Okay.
about California. But he constantly reminds me, and you remind me all the time too, that I think we ought to just take the southern border, kind of like, is it the what the President Trump just put from Texas to California under federal jurisdiction and put the military on the southern border? I think we ought to just go ahead and stop at California and go north and just cut off that part. But then people remind me of how important the numbers are and the income and that the people are there. We need to try to save California.
Well, yeah, we have three of the largest shipping ports in the world on the West Coast here. And a lot of products, come in to California and go into the rest of the country. So, yeah, California is, like I say, they're becoming a national security risk for the entire country.
Why would Governor Newsom stand up on national TV and say, I'm calling President Z to do my own trade deal? That is not very smart. Why don't you pick the phone up and President Trump would answer your call, Governor, and say, let's work something out? That was pretty stupid, I got to admit.
Yeah, well, instead, Newsom is suing the federal government.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Oklahoma State University, but holy smokes, that's dumb.
Well, I guess they say dumb and dumber.
Well, I'm the dumber out of this conversation, but you sit back and kind of go, where is Governor Newsom? And I've seen this clip before, and I can't remember when, but he says we want to make fossil fuels so expensive they won't be able to be bought. He has said that before, and I'm trying to find it again so I can absolutely put it there. But that is what's happening.
Well, again, that's on the supply side. He's driving it up that way, and it's not eliminating the demand. To be, I guess, pessimistic, if you mandate people stop using the products,
right?
I mean, no one uses crude oil. It's when it's refined, then it becomes usable in transportation fuels and oil derivatives make the products. But if you demand that the public stop using the products, close the hospitals, close the airports, there'll be no for refineries. We may lose a couple billion people.
Right. California is such an amazing place.
Well, Stu, okay. I was interviewed on a New York TV station recently, and their first question to me was, "Hey, Ron, we understand you're pro-oil." I said, wait a minute. I'm not pro-oil. I'm pro the products we get from oil. If we've had 200 years, oil's been around for 200 years, and we've had 200 years to come up with a replacement and unable to do so. And all we do is keep coming up with more and more ways to use oil. EVs, 100% made with oil.
Right.
And, one of the things that Newsom is doing, he wants to eliminate the sale of gasoline engines by 2035. Well, the bad news is EVs are being bought by the wealthy, the elite people, but generally they're second vehicles, low mileage users, but the workhorse is an internal combustion engine. And so it's not really reducing gasoline consumption that much. And again, gasoline is just one of the products out of those refineries.
Of the 6,000 that I always see that number you use in your articles. I mean,
exactly. And aviation fuel, we're the largest consumer of aviation fuel in America, which is one of the products that come out of the refineries. The diesel fuel, we're, I think, the second largest next to Texas.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I mean, all these products that are coming out of the refinery, they're not made just to make them. They're made to meet the demands of society.
Right.
And demands are not going away.
We still got to sit back and as we make these conversations, and one of your big things is to just start talking about this. I see around the world that people are starting to wake up that you can't make an iPhone out of a windmill. I mean, all
No.
of a sudden, it's now, wait, the first time you say that, they're like, no. Now they're like, oh, yeah. So I think that it is making a big difference with people. Speaking
Well,
of
think
that, I
about that,
have
Stu, because everything that needs electricity, the iPhone, the iPad, the computers, the defibrillators, is all made from oil products.
right,
And, we have 6 ways to generate electricity. And the interesting thing there is electricity came after oil because, wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, natural gas, coal, the computers, the wires, the insulation is all made from the products made from oil.
right,
So if you get rid of oil, Stu, you get rid of electricity.
right. And the copper to get the wires from point A to point B, like in Texas, those windmills don't just sit out there killing birds out in the middle of the Texas by themselves. They have to have a $3.5 billion copper line to run all the way back into town.
And all the machinery and equipment to erect them, to build them, to mine for the materials in foreign countries, humongous equipment. It's not made by wind turbines.
Right.
Wind
No.
turbines can make nothing. All they do is generate electricity. They make absolutely nothing for society.
The
And
you
that's
haven't
the confusion is the word energy. I try and stop using the word energy. Talk about electricity or products.
right.
Without
See,
the products, you have
my problem, Ronald, is I've run a company called Sandstone in Sandstone Group, but my Energy News beat because I was also running another oil site, and it's not about oil; it's about energy. And so that's why you always correct me, Stu. It is not, I'm like, it's my Energy News beat. So, but your article coming out, another refinery closure in California increases the state's dependency on China. You've got this article that will be, I'll have a lot of it in the show notes when this podcast airs.
great.
So, where do you normally put out your publications at?
And America Out Loud News. Like I said, I'll be submitting it. I shared with you my final draft, and I'll be submitting it later today, and it'll be published next Monday.
No, that'll be fantastic. I'll tell you, I appreciate you and your expertise around here. But what do you see from two things? What could Secretary Wright do to help turn the tide in California? We have Doug Burgum and we have Lee Zeldin. Do you think the federal government could help in try to get discussions with Governor Newsom? Is there a way, a thought process? Because you mentioned and your passion is getting a discussion. How do we get a discussion with Governor Newsom?
I think you got to promote the concept of the energy supply demand equation.
Okay.
It's supply and demand. And we're trying to, we got the demands. We know the demands. We got airports, hospitals, everybody wants their iPhones. We have a lifestyle we're not going to back off on.
Right.
We're not going to go back to the 1800s.
No.
And so to meet the demands, how are we going to meet the demands? Yeah, it's a great idea to transition away from fossil fuels, but without a backup plan, Stu, you don't want to jump out of the airplane without a parachute.
Nope. No, I wouldn't
And
look nearly as good.
Splashdown.
Yeah. Oops.
But I think we really have to talk about supply and demand. And, and again, going to wind and solar, again, that's only generating electricity. It's not
Right.
making any products demanded by society.
You know what's funny is for years I've been tracking coal use in California, and coal use in California has remained stable. And if it increased because of cement, people don't realize that coal is still being used in California for cement plants.
Right.
You're not away from California. Hello, you've not gotten away from coal yet. In fact, the last coal plant that California was still using was in Nevada, I believe. And I believe they've just gotten away from that, from importing that electricity. But the problem is the amount of coal went from power plants, and it's also now into that. So Coal is still king in California, but nobody's talking about it.
Right, right. But if we can focus on, supply and demand, we'll get down to realities. And, Newsom is convinced that wind and solar is going to replace oil. But as we talked about, wind and solar doesn't make anything. You're going to generate electricity. But if you
No.
don't have oil to make the iPhone, you don't need
How,
electricity for the iPhone.
no, you really can't. So what are some of what other people are visiting with you about? What are you hearing when you start these conversations?
Still, I'm seeing more and more people around the world, Australia, Brazil, writing similar articles. Really got to
Good.
open up the discussion because, again, this idea that renewables are going to replace fossil fuels, it's an impossibility. They do different things.
Right. The Texas grid, it's taken us 100 years to build the Texas grid. It's not going to change. And in fact, you take a look at electricity prices between New York and California and Texas. Texas is one half the cost of those two other states. What's different? Natural gas and nuclear.
Mhm.
Oops.
Oops, we have one remaining nuclear power plant in California, and the efforts are to shut it down. Well, if you follow the lobbying money, Pacific Corp is spending millions of dollars lobbying the California Public Utility Commission, which explains why they want to shut down the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant and import Pacific Corp electricity, which is coming from out of state emission spewing coal fired power plants.
Exactly.
Follow the money.
Follow the money, and that's why I kind of want to set that up for Governor Newsom and Doge. Doge needs to follow the money and find out why is he creating or impacting the supply side of the equation so heavily. I
Yes.
think it bodes a very serious discussion point of why the refineries and regulatory problems in California are going on. It's
Yes.
worth asking.
I would love to have that discussion. If we get Newsom on the next call, that'd be great.
Have you seen his podcast? Oh my goodness. I would not even want to have him on the pod. He's always welcome. In fact, I would even go and interview him. In fact, if I get an interview with Governor Newsom, you're coming with me. We'll have some serious fun. I will bring Mike Umbro and we would have a absolute hoot. But I would actually be we would have a great meeting. And I think it would be fantastic because it would be talking about energy.
Exactly. Yeah. Why would you want to eliminate the supply? Demand keeps increasing.
Exactly.
It's just, it's crazy.
It is. And so at energyliteracy.net is where people find you. Is that correct?
Well, that's my email address, ronald.stein at energyliteracy.net. Or you can Google me. I'm all over the internet. America Out Loud News has all my books and all my articles. And
All right.
yeah,
Well,
link
I'll
up
tell
with
you
me
what,
and I'll get you on my distribution list and
absolutely.
stimulate more conversations.
Hey, I look forward to our next one. Thank you so much for your time today, sir. I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Have a great day.